Hey there, it's Ashley, and this is the Abundant Soul Podcast. I am so excited to share this episode with you all, as you will get to hear from the lovely Leah Kelley, who was my very first coach I'd ever worked with. Leah is a soon-to-be mama, proud dog mom, newlywed, and a financial coach with a background in social work. As you'll hear in the episode, Leah's journey with money was not always smooth. Growing up, she was never taught about finances. Who can relate to that? When she had money, she'd spend it, and that cycle followed her into her mid-20s, along with all of her post-grad student loans. This led to crippling money shame, which only made her avoid her finances even more. She saw herself as the poor friend, and that identity kept her stuck in unhealthy money habits. Her turning point came when she discovered Beyond the Green Coaching, a women-owned finance company that helped her completely shift her money mindset. She learned to love budgeting, gain the financial literacy she never had, and most importantly, realized that financial freedom was actually possible. She loved the process so much, she became a coach with them, helping others break free from money shame, take control of their finances, and build wealth on their own terms. Again, she helped me through all of this too, so I can vouch for that. But in this episode, Leah's going to share her journey, what she learned the hard way, how she turned things around, and why she's so passionate about helping others do the same. All right, let's jump in. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Hello, ladies. Excited to be here today. We have a very special guest. We have Leah Kelley with us today. Hello, Leah.
Hello. I'm so happy to be here.
Yay, me too. Leah and I know each other. She actually was my coach, my first ever coach. So she's very cool, has a lot of wonderful wisdom and insight. So I'm very excited for you to be here today.
I'm excited too. I heard a lot about you, so excited.
Yes.
Yes, thank you for having me. I love telling my story, and Ashley was a all-star client. I'm always like, oh, it's like she almost set the bar too high, because then I was like, everyone, no, I'm kidding. But Ashley, no, I always talk about Ashley and just how amazing of a client you were. And it just is such an honor to now be a part of this podcast with you.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, I really liked coaching with you because you made it. I think because your journey going through everything, like, made you an amazing coach or makes you an amazing coach. So you never made me feel like I didn't know something or shameful about myself for not knowing things. You were like the way shower. So I kind of want to talk today about how your journey got started, and kind of like go backwards from where you are now, helping others to kind of find their way to abundance and work through some of those things. If we can kind of learn how you got on that path.
Yeah, 100%. So I think at a very young age, I kind of knew I was always going to be a helper in some way. I think that was naturally part of me. And so I knew I wanted to end up in a field helping others. I kind of went the more traditional route of kind of going into psychology in college, and then I went and got a master's degree in social work, to become a social worker, which I did. And before I'll go back to that aspect of it, but I started my journey to helping people specifically around their finances because I was absolutely horrible with money. I avoided it at all costs. Like, I remember the physical reaction I would get around people who talked about money, whether it was people talking about money in a positive way, people talking about money in a negative way. I just always felt like I didn't know anything about it, which then made me feel, for a high educated person, it made me feel very, to be blunt, dumb. And, I just didn't know anything. And it was hard. It was such a big part of my identity. And during the pandemic, I was actually working in a field where I was a fitness instructor, which is funny because I just told you that I went and got a master's degree in social work and then I was a fitness instructor, so that's a whole other story. Um, but all forms of my income essentially either cut in half because I was doing like virtual workouts from my living room, or some studios I worked for stopped doing classes altogether. So I think if I were to pinpoint the moment where I was like, oh man, I have to grow up, it probably would have been that moment. I think my avoidance was so, I was relying on my avoidance and shame for so long. I kind of just became part of my lifestyle. Like shame was just part of me. It wasn't something that I think I even noticed a lot of the time. But that split moment of the pandemic and having to like sit on my computer and apply for unemployment, which I know a lot of people did, and thank goodness they had that support because that really is the way I was able to survive. Was the moment of like, okay, I actually need help. I can't just keep avoiding and pretending that everything's fine and showing up for the people in my life who love me and pretending that like, oh, I got this, I'm good. When in reality, I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing with my finances. And that led me to the company that I now work for, which is Beyond the Green Coaching. And I went through their program with the wonderful CEO and owner, AJ Schneider. And it completely changed my life. And that's kind of like the tiny bit story of how I kind of landed into the finance world.
I would love to ask you about, so you were avoidant about anything related to money. So what was the feeling that was brought when you realized that you needed help? And what was the feeling and how did you overcome this fear or shame to actually start looking for someone who could help you and taking the steps, having actions? Because sometimes we are aware, but making the actions toward it is the most difficult part. So can you share a little bit of that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So funny enough, I heard about Beyond the Green through an old coworker who went through the program previously before me. And I think, as I'm sure you guys can relate, ladies can relate, that shame is so powerful when you're alone, right? Like it's bigger. It wants you to be alone. It wants you to not tell anyone or like not share your story, and the more that you don't tell, the bigger the shame gets and the power, the more avoidant and shameful that you feel. And so I think it really was seeing this friend be so open and vulnerable and sharing her story about like, oh yeah, I didn't know anything about money and I did this program and now I have a debt plan and now I have like an emergency fund and now I know how to properly use credit cards. And I was like, wait a second, I know this person, I respect this person. I thought this person had it all together. Like, like this representation that I think a lot of us do, right? When we feel shame, we pretend it's not there and we pretend that everything's fine. And so that was the moment where I was like, okay, I don't feel as lonely. And if this person went through it, and I think also it just being another woman, I think also in the financial world, I know me personally, I know a lot of my clients, we talk about this. As women, I think it's also hard to be more open about finances and not knowing it, because I think in our society, for a long time, women were taught that the men handle it, or, like it's not really part of our role. We don't have to worry about that. So yeah, it was that moment of like knowing that I'm not the only, someone that I respected and trusted, and she shared her story, was really like the turning point for me. Yeah.
I wanted to ask too, because one of the things that I loved with working with you is how we did a deep dive into the wounding around money that you might not know exists. So can you kind of go into that with, once you started, like, you shared about, okay, something needs to change, and you started taking steps, like what was it like to kind of start to uncover that kind of stuff?
Yeah, it was hard. I think with any type of deep wound work, right? It's hard. Therapy, obviously I still am a therapist and I still do social work also. And something I learned throughout my social work career and then obviously through this coaching program is that this isn't easy. And I think that's why a lot of people continue to avoid it. I think that's a huge part of the continuation of people just being able to figure it out later because it's uncomfortable and it can feel really uneasy. So I know for me, during the money wounds work, I didn't expect to realize or like pinpoint all these things that went back to my childhood. And I think that is the biggest takeaway that I also see with my clients in doing this work and when I went through it is we learn habits as children, right? As kids, we watch our parents do everything or our caretakers, whoever may know, maybe it might not be directly parents, but grandparents and friends and like friends' parents and daycare workers. And that part for me was hard because I think I already was trying to heal other wounds in my relationship with my parents and other wounds that I won't dive into, but are like, years of therapy have helped. And connecting it back to money was really hard. But I think the biggest piece from it that I'm so happy I did it because I think it's the piece that allows people to forgive themselves is you have the ability to go back and say, wow, this now makes sense. There's answers to the avoidance. There's answers to the shame. When I think for the whole time when I didn't know about money, I was blaming just solely myself. Right? And the money wounds isn't like, oh, you need to blame other people and like be mad at other people. A huge piece of it is forgiveness around what you were taught as a child or forgiveness around a specific maybe event that happened that caused you to feel differently or caused you to feel a certain way about money, right? But it's not only forgiveness for the other people in your life, it allows you to have that forgiveness for yourself. So like I would do it 100 times over, even though it was really, really hard to identify like, oh, that makes sense, like that wound. I would do it 100 times over because it allowed me to forgive myself. And that's a huge key component to getting your finances in order. And I don't think people connect that because people don't think money has anything to do with emotions. And it so does. It's so attached to emotions.
Could you share different wounds that you can have as a child that has an impact on the money as an adult, the relationship with the money?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of some. Yeah, I'll share some of mine and then I'll kind of think of other ones maybe from clients that are just stand out to me. For me, I grew up with parents who, my parents were together until I was in 5th grade. We grew up in a nice big house with lots of land in a really cute and quaint town in Massachusetts. It has like one stoplight. It almost feels like a Netflix movie. Like it's just cows and apple orchards. And, my parents built the house from the ground up. We had a pool. We had nice cars. Like I just grew up in a family, and I was very lucky to have that as a child. I never really was told no. I mean, I'm sure I was told no, but we went on yearly vacations. Back to school shopping was like my favorite day ever because we got to go to the mall with my mom and my aunt and my grandma, and I essentially could get everything I wanted. Like in that sense, like I don't really remember being told, oh, you can't have this Abercrombie and Fitch winter jacket because it's ridiculously overpriced. Like it was always like, okay, we'll make it work. And so I think one of my wounds is that I grew up in an environment where essentially I was able to get the things I wanted. But I also grew up in an environment where if my parents made a mistake, they used money as a way to be like, oh, well, here's this thing. This will make you happy. Here's this materialistic thing. Even though like as the child, it was never this like, I'm so sorry for doing this to you type of behavior. And so I learned 2 things. I learned in that moment, looking back, as an adult, I learned that you can always get whatever you want because you can just put it on a credit card. Like, it was really hard for me to say no to things. Like, I didn't want to sacrifice not shopping at the nice stores as an adult. I didn't want to sacrifice not getting my hair done more often than I probably needed to, right? I wanted to like live this like upkept lifestyle. The second thing I learned from those interactions with my parents is that anytime things were hard or anytime emotionally I was hurt by someone, I didn't feel good enough, I was having negative self-talk, I would go and shop. I would go and reward myself. I would say, okay, I'm feeling like crap. I don't want to face those feelings. I'm going to just go make something that makes me feel better. And it made me feel better for what? Maybe an hour? It didn't really feel better, but I learned that as a kid of like, oh, this makes me feel better in the moment because mom and dad messed up. And this is how they're kind of, repairing the relationship. Something else I see a lot with clients, a lot of wounds, is sometimes parents talk about money too much to their kids. Parents allow their kids to be too involved in the finances, and that kind of has this other on the end of the spectrum reaction where then adults are like, oh my goodness, I need to be saving. Money is this really scary thing, and if I don't have X amount, whatever that X amount is, let's just say it's like $10,000. If I don't have $10,000 in my bank account, because that's what mom and dad would always stress about, if they didn't have $10,000 in their bank account, the world's ending, right? They kind of grow up being like hoarding their money, and then that allows
It's you.
yeah, and I think if people were to say the two stories, like me, I got into debt and I spent money. I overspent. And then there's the other end of the spectrum where people hoard and save money. I think oftentimes society is like, well, this person's good. The person who's saving their money and hoarding their money, that's a good thing. Person with debt, they're bad. And I hate the whole good and bad thing. As a coach, I really try to take that away because both situations have pros and cons to it, right? Like, sure, the person who's hoarding all their money has money and that's like a really secure feeling, but that doesn't take like that wound has to be worked through because it's a wound still. It's like you don't need to be hoarding all your money. Put it in investments, go on vacation, use those credit card points. So those are kind of two examples of wounds that I've seen that are on both ends of the spectrum.
I love what you shared, and to be a hoarder myself, the feeling. I don't have debt, but the feeling when I get close to a certain number is the same as if I was in debt. I'm like, oh my God, I'm there. Like, I can't spend. And my husband will be like, what? I'm like, no, I have to limit and be careful. And so the feeling is exactly the same in the end. So.
Yeah, that's a great point, right? It still causes anxiety, right? I mean, money is such an anxiety-provoking thing, which I think people are just like, okay, whatever, everyone feels this way. And sure, right, as we know, I'm sure you guys know this too, like anxiety is not like one of those emotions that we can permanently get rid of. It's always anxiety. We have to learn how to deal with it. But it's just a good reminder that yeah, there's two ends of the spectrum when it comes to money wounds, and then everything in between. Of course, there's so many things that come up that's in between. Yeah.
So when you started doing the coaching, you're like, okay, I need to get, change some things, and then you realized your money wounds type of thing. Now when it's time to maybe look at these habits and start to recreate them, change them, stop them, start them, because like you were saying, like shopping when you're feeling a certain way, or shopping at certain stores, or getting your hair done, what was it like when you kind of started having to shift? Like, because everything that you had done up until this point was a certain way, right? So what was it like to be like in that shift moment?
Yeah, that's a great question, Ashley. Hard. Money wounds, I mean, the whole work is hard, right? I think we don't necessarily change. We don't drive towards change if we know it's going to be easy. It was hard, but I also was ready. Like I think that that moment when I talked earlier about like me applying for unemployment and having this feeling of like, oh my God, the world is in crisis. It's not just poor me, right? Like I think I often held this like victim mentality for a lot of my young adulthood, early 20 up to my early 20s, mid 20s. I was like, oh my God, the world is going through a pandemic, and here I am, like with this world's smallest violin, being like, I can't afford. How am I gonna go and get my nails done? Like it just like it felt like I was ready. Like I was like, I don't want to. Enough is enough. Like kind of like shaking myself, like grow up, type of kind of. So I think that was a piece of it too. Like I truly believe in order for this work to be successful, you do have to be ready. Like there has to be this component that's driving you of not only do you want the change, you also have to be ready to do it. So that's like the first biggest part. The second part of it is, you know, I how do I say this? I had goals. Like it was this thing too, where like in my personal romantic relationship with my now husband and future baby daddy, or I guess he is the baby daddy. We definitely finances was our biggest area of tension. I think a lot of people can relate to that. Finances, it's not a sexy topic. It causes fights, you know. And again, I think that's something that's been more normalized when it really shouldn't be as normalized. Of like, oh, it's totally fine to hide packages from your partner, or like, you know, like go and open up a credit card and not tell them, or whatever it is, you know. And it was causing a lot of tension in our relationship. And honestly, it was that moment too of like, if I didn't figure this stuff out, I could potentially lose him. Like it was to the point of like, he cared for me and loved me so much, and he tried to help, and he was the financially responsible one in the relationship. And I ran away from that, even though he was trying to help, right? Because I was like, this is so uncomfortable. I don't want my partner to see this side of me. And so it was the pandemic. It was this idea of like, he didn't give me an ultimatum, but essentially he was like, I know you can do this. I know you want this. I'm trying to help. And clearly there's a blockage because I'm like too close to you, right? Like I can't be the one who helps you. You need to figure this out, or like, I don't know if I can see a marriage and babies with you, which makes, now I look back at it, I'm like, that makes total sense, right? Total sense. I tell clients all the time who are single, I'm like, you need to figure out how to talk about money with your future partner, because it is a huge part of your relationship and how you want to see your life. I feel like I'm going way off track of what you asked me, actually.
No.
Remind me the original question.
No, I mean, you're in it. It's like the knowing that the things have to change, and what that was like for, you know, like, was there resistance there? Did it ever feel like I'm never going to get to where I want to be? I'm just going to give up? Like, what were the feelings when you started pivoting?
Yeah. Oh, totally. I mean, I definitely was like, can I do this? I definitely was resistant. I think it was the money wounds, and then there's a whole section of our coaching component where we talk about values and goals. And I think that is such a crucial piece to this work as well, because we don't even look at numbers until like 3 months into the program.
Wow.
We really do a lot of the mindset stuff. Because it's so important to, I think the reason why I got to that point where I was like, I'm ready to change, is because I was able to start healing those wounds, looking at the past and then looking in the future. So it's like, I knew one day I wanted to be married. I knew I wanted to have children. I knew I wanted to live in a house. I knew like a goal of mine was to be successful in my career, to help other people, to be a mother who potentially could only have to work part-time, or like be at home with the children involved in their lives, right? Like these are all these goals I had. I wanted to be making 6 figures, like, right? Like the fun ones too. I wanna go on vacation to Europe once a year. And for so long, I had this mentality of like, I'll just figure it out when I'm older. Or someone will come in and like, I'll just magically one day wake up with $1 million. which I know sounds silly saying that, but a lot of clients have those thoughts. Like, I'm just waiting to open my mailbox and have that check. Or I'm just going to marry, single clients. Like, I'll just marry someone who makes a lot of money. And I think for me, going back to maybe a wound earlier, is like, my mom was a stay-at-home mom for a little bit, and my dad worked for a company where like he was the breadwinner. And so I also think in my own relationship with my now husband, Sean, I just kind of assumed he works for a good company. He's going to move up the ladder. He'll support me. And he does. He supports me in so many ways. But then I realized throughout this work, like, I don't want to not have my own money. Or like I realize I'm someone who wants to contribute financially and in all the other ways I want to contribute as a partner. So doing the values and goals was also a big wake up call for me, because I realized, like, stop living in this bubble. You're the only one who's going to be able to get you to those goals with the help of other people. But as you know, like, if you want to make change, you have to wake up and be like, I'm doing this thing today. You can have people remind you or like support you or hold your hand while doing it. But it was like, okay, if I want to be a stay-at-home mom, how do I then get there? Through saving. Like, how do I get there? Through finding a job that will support me throughout part-time work. How do I, do all these things? And I think that ultimately helped me, because then when it got to the actual budget and we got to the actual numbers and I had to input all of my data, and I realized, okay, well, if I get the nails done and I spend $300 a month on clothes and I go out to these fancy LA restaurants, not that I really was doing any of this stuff, but like, if I go out to eat a lot, if I always say yes to the vacations and I always say yes to going to get coffee, right? All those small things added up. And I was like, oh, okay, well, no wonder I'm in debt, because I don't have any money left over. Like, the numbers were like, those don't lie. Income, I was overspending what I was making. And it was a lot easier to say no to the daily coffees. It was a lot easier to say I'm not going to do my nails for the next year, 6 months, right? Unless maybe a special occasion. It was a lot easier to say I don't need clothes. I have clothes. Let's not, And it wasn't this like idea of like, oh, don't spend, the no spend months, which I don't necessarily love. If you do them, good for you. But I just don't think it's a healthy behavior. It allowed me to say no because I could see why I was saying no, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Like, before I thought a budget, I would have to say no because someone was just telling me that I was bad and you aren't good with money, and here comes the shame. When in reality, doing the money wounds, doing the values and goals, and then heading to the numbers, I was saying no because not buying this sweater is going to allow me to be the type of mom I want to be. And I know that might sound so far-fetched, but honestly, if you break it down, that's truly how you get there.
I want to piggyback on what you said. I believe from what you were sharing, there is a part of a wound that is codependence. Mm-hmm. Where you would be like, oh, my husband will be making the money, so I will be okay and I can spend. And the materialistic aspect also is part of getting an identity through material, right? So it's a codependence as well. Different one, but it's there. So my question would be, how, did you demystify codependence by being able to, check your own money story, heal your wounds, but still manage to get support from your partner?
Yeah, this is a really good question. I have to think about this real quick. I honestly think it's because my partner was really good at setting boundaries in regards to how he wanted to show up with our finances. So what I mean by that, kind of going back in time. So probably when we were living in New York, 6 years ago? Yeah, 6.5 years ago. And then we moved to LA. And I think part of that codependency, right, that like wound, that this identity, or just like how I thought my life trajectory was going to go, is we always split finances. So like he had his money, I had my money when we were dating. Like, we lived together, but we were dating. And in the beginning of him courting me, he was like, he was a gentleman, and he paid for the dates, and he paid for going out and all that stuff. And then as we got closer to one another, and like we decided to move in with one another, he did sit down with me again, because he didn't avoid finances like me, and he's like, we gotta talk about it. And I was like, okay, I'm sweating. This is totally normal. I'm not sweating. Because he did. I mean, I would talk about money. I had to. It's like, how are we gonna pay for rent? Like, can we afford this? All this stuff. And he kind of came at it as like, hey, I have my goal. I have my own goals. I have goals with you, but like I have my own goals. Like I have student loans I need to pay off. I have some credit card debt I need to pay off. I want to have X amount of my savings, right? So like he would talk about money in this way that like caused me to feel that avoidance. But then I think that also, to go back to your question, because he was so like more financially responsible, I was like, oh, he's my answer. I'll just like one day, like when we get married, like I know he'll be able to support us. But it's not like we had a conversation about that. That was just, this is like the first time I'm saying this out loud, actually, in this way. That was like me really almost creating this like fake utopia. It's like what I thought I wanted, if that makes sense, right? Like I was like, oh, this is just what's going to be. And don't get me wrong, was it very securing to know that I had a partner at the end of the day who was financially responsible? Yes. But it didn't make me like, looking back now, it's not like I went to him and was like, oh, give me $100. I can't pay my credit card bill. Like I didn't talk to him about the money, which is the interesting piece if you really think about it right now. Like it's not like he was just giving me like a, oh, here you're going shopping. Here's my credit card. Like that's what I think I mean by boundaries. Like he was able to say, I'm putting my head down, focusing on my stuff. I'm here to support you if you want me to like create a budget for you in the way that I use a budget. But it allowed me, like his boundary setting showed me the healthy way, in addition to going through Beyond the Greens program, of like the way you should be thinking about money. So I think that's kind of what helped me understand I could always go to him for support, and I know I can. And now we like every Sunday morning have coffee and talk about our finances, and I get so excited, which is just so great. And like we're opening a 529 plan for our baby this weekend. That's on our to-do list. Like that stuff is like, wow, that's so cool. I know some people listening might be like, that is just a part of the thing, but like to me, like this is a big deal, people. So yeah, I think I would say his ability to be supportive, but also show me healthy habits and set boundaries with me, and not just be this person who's like, I'll fix it here. Because I think that would have caused me to not do this work. I'd be like, oh, here he is. He's the person that maybe I saw from my parents, but clearly it didn't work for my parents because they got divorced. Other reasons too. It wasn't just that, but
Yeah. I wanted to ask you, go back to when you were kind of, I guess, taking inventory of, going through your budget, like where's my money going and does it align with where I want to go? I love that, and I love doing that too. But when you said saying yes to all the travel, like that was like one of the things, because I feel like that's kind of a boundary, is, saying no. Like maybe you were the person that said yes to all the trips and like your friends, this, that, and the other. So what was it like? Because it felt like the other things, like choosing not to get the coffee, choosing not to get the nails done, that's kind of more yourself. But when you involve other people and having to say no to trips, to dinners, to outings, what was that like?
yeah, hard. About like everything of answering, like everything that you're asking me, actually, like hard. Because I want to everyone listening, like I don't want to make this sound easy or like, oh yeah, just do this program and la la la. Like, it's work. It's hard work. As a people pleaser, or I like to call myself a recovering people pleaser because I'm working on it. It was really hard because you're right. That was spot on, Ashley. I wasn't just saying no to myself. Like, oh, I can go and get coffee with a friend and they get the coffee and I just like get a water and I still get to spend time with them and they might not even notice that I didn't get the coffee, even though inside I might be like, I want the coffee, but I'm not going to do it. It was hard, and I think it also, throughout this work, shifted actually some of my relationships with friends, which was really hard in the moment too, because I think I realized that there are some people in my life early on that weren't as supportive as I thought they were. And it happens a lot with clients too. Like sometimes I have clients say like they set a boundary with a friend and then the friends kind of start to drift away from them, and then we talk about going back to their values of like, well, is this a friend, is this a type of person that you want in your life when like you are doing something good for yourself and they walk away or they don't show up in a way that's supportive for you. I was lucky when I did this work. I was living in LA and I had moved to obviously a new city, and my husband's best friend lived there and his best friend had a girlfriend, and so I was very like, I had kind of a smaller network of friends, but I also was like starting kind of fresh in the sense of I didn't really have a community out there yet. Mm-hmm. And I think that was a little bit helpful because I could meet new friends in LA and kind of already set those boundaries. So if it came up like, oh, hey, we want to go on this weekend trip, I would say things. It's all about the way you say it. I fully believe it. It's really about the way that you talk about money. In the past, I would use humor and make fun of myself. Or I would really make it about the fact of like, oh, you know me, I don't have any savings. I can't go on that. I can't afford to go on that, right? And it was like this negative feeling of like, I'm the poor friend. Versus when saying no to bigger things like travel or a girls' weekend or something that involves other people, it's really just saying to them, hey, that sounds so amazing. Unfortunately, I looked at my budget and I ran the numbers and I just can't, it's not in the budget this month. However, I can afford to do it in 3 months if we want to like set up a different weekend to do like the girls' trip to, Santa Barbara for wine tasting. I mean, oh my goodness, if anyone says, do you want to go wine tasting? It would be the hardest thing ever. But I really do think it's the way you say it and phrase it. And I say that to my clients all the time. I'll never forget, I had a client who called me and she was like, I can't do it. Like my friends I'm going to have no friends and, they're never going to want to hang out with me and it's going to be so hard to say no. And we practiced and we talked about it. And I was like, you got to be confident in saying, hey girl, it's not in my budget this month. Like, why don't you come over and I'll make you a pasta dinner. And then she was like, oh my God, all my friends were so excited to actually hang in and not go out she lived in New York City and not go out and spend like $150 at a New York City brunch. Mm-hmm. Because I also learned when you are the friend in the friend group who starts saying no and setting boundaries, a lot of times your friends are thankful because they wanted to also say no and didn't want to be the person who said no. And it opens up this conversation and it opens up like, wow, I didn't know this friend was struggling with their credit card debt. Mm-hmm. Like it just allows you to be this bigger voice. And that's a really powerful feeling. It's talking about it's being vulnerable and bringing up a shameful thing in a way that doesn't then make you feel like crap after, right? By voicing and wording it in the way that leaves you feeling powerful over the emotion shame.
Mm-hmm. Wow, I love that. And so do you think that healing your own money stories and, growing into the money world, I would say it like this, will have a ripple effect on everyone around you? And the more you will talk about it, the more they will heal their own wounds and the more they will have a ripple effect on others as well?
Yes, full-heartedly. I mean, that is a huge part of Beyond the Greens movement. We want to create a world where we can talk about money and create a shame-free place where you can come and talk about money and not feel judged like that. Ultimately, if I had a magical wand and I could just, there's lots of problems to fix in the world, but if that's something that I could fix, it would be that, right? So I 100% agree. And it's interesting, don't get me wrong. There's times where in my own personal friend group or with my friends and families, I do still get scared to bring up money with some particular people because I don't know how they're going to react. But I will say this. Since I've been doing this, I'm going into my 3-year anniversary is going to be in April. Wow, it's crazy. 3 years of doing this. I will randomly get people who I met, 5 years ago, or like from college, or, from when I was teaching fitness in New York 6 years ago, DM me when I post about something or just share something, whether it's small or big, about my money story, and be like, "Oh, I've been following you for so long, and I'm so interested and intrigued and so inspired by your story. Like, I'd love to get some help or just talk about it." And that reminder to me, I'm like, whoa, never stop telling your story, because it does hit people at different times. Like, you know what I mean? It does. People are watching, people are listening, even if they're not gung ho, like, yeah, tell me how to get out of credit card debt the second they meet me, which not many people do, but you know what I mean? Like, it's not like some people are like, tell me about credit card points. Other people are kind of sitting in the background just listening. But I do truly believe the more you talk about it, the less uncomfortable it gets to talk about it, and then you are inspiring other people. I think with anything, right? Like with any part of our story. Finances, I think, are just still so taboo in the holistic world of health.
Yeah. I feel like everyone's like, oh, I should have it figured out, so I'm not even going to talk about it. And then, at least for me, that's how I felt. Because right before we worked together, I was 38, and I was like, there's no way I can tell someone I don't know what I'm doing, or I don't understand, retirement plans. I was like, I'm just going to keep that inside. And I think I probably carried around shame without knowing it.
Totally.
So, yeah. And then it's like, once you start to do the work, you're like, wow, okay, this feels really good to be like, I don't know, I'm getting help and I'm learning. I'm starting now. So you can find like being proud of yourself and empowerment, and like kind of like what you said about you got to do it yourself. Not that you have to, you get to do it yourself. It's the work, like, to carry yourself through it, rather than waiting for that. Is it Ed McMahon, the guy from like the Publishers Clearinghouse, coming like, you won $1 million, or someone coming to save you? It's like it's you are the one to kind of get you through it.
Yeah. And how powerful is that when you really think about it?
Yeah.
I would love to hear your point of view for any person, but mostly women, who are in a position but getting paid less, where they realize that they are getting paid less, but you have this fear of, if I speak up, will I get fired? Do I need to look somewhere else? Because again, money is taboo. So I would love to have your opinion on that.
Yeah, that's a great question. Oh, negotiations and going in and talking about wanting a promotion or anything, or that's such a palm sweating topic for, I think, a lot of people. One of the things we do in our coaching is we do have a whole section where we have a career workbook, and we really talk about what is it you want to, whether a client wants to shift careers altogether or a client is feeling what you just said. I'm getting underpaid. I don't know how to talk about promotions or a pay raise in a way that I feel confident around. So I do work with clients in regards to like working through that mindset, because I think ultimately, why do predominantly women feel like they can't earn more? Like, why? I mean, I think it's because we've been told so many different beliefs around this, right? We're told, oh, as a young kid, it's like, oh, dad makes more, or there's that's a man's job. Men just have the ability to walk into a room and ask for more money, right? Like, and if you think about it, just similar to money wounds as that we hear and absorb and energetically take into our bodies, even if we say to ourselves in that moment, oh, I don't believe that, there's still something about those, you hearing that sticks in your body. So I think first and foremost, I always remind clients Now, again, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not like, I can't say 100% certainty that this wouldn't happen. But I often say to clients, I'm like, if you go into your job and you ask for an appropriate raise or like an appropriate amount or ask for a bonus, the worst thing that they can do is say no. I think a lot of times people think the worst thing that can happen is they're going to fire you. I think even with when you get a new job and you're in that negotiation process after they send you the offer letter, I think a lot of people have this fear of like, if I ask for $5,000 more, they're going to take the offer letter away and I'm not going to get the job. And they want us to think that. They want us to believe that they have all the power. And I think it goes back to just going into a room. I say you got to write something down for it to be real. So like write down what you want, write down what you're hoping for, write down why you deserve it, right? That's a huge part of the workbook that we do is we do a regular resume and we do a brag resume. And I remember when I saw this, I was like, what the heck is a brag resume? A brag resume is you list out all the reasons why you are in a position for a raise or promotion. It's like, it's not just saying a simple fact of like, oh, well, I'm going to use the example of just being a coach, right? I brought in 10 new clients this year. It's like, okay, cool. Yeah, that's a brag. Let's buff it up. I brought in 10 new clients this year that brought in, I'm just going to use random numbers here. 10 new clients this year that brought in $10,000 worth of revenue for this business. And without my ability to connect with these clients, the company would have been at a $10,000 loss, right? Like when you say it that way, it's like, oh shit.
It does add a lot.
Give her what
more.
she wants.
Money. What are you asking for? Yeah, like, right? So I think too, it's about the prep work. So money's emotional, going back to that piece. Go into a negotiation or a review doing your homework, like writing it down, not just having it in your head, practicing with people in your life who are going to be like, I'll be your boss. Like, I'll ask the hard questions. I'll look at you and kind of give you the tough no. Because the more you're prepared and you practice and you really flush out the reasons why, it's a lot harder for them to say no, in my opinion. That would be my biggest advice on that. And also just try to quiet those beliefs. Like tell them, like acknowledge them and be like, that's not true. I am worthy of this raise. And if honestly, I do say this to clients, if your company doesn't see it and you feel unhappy, unseen, unheard, undervalued, start looking for a new job. I know it's easier said than done, but like start putting those feelers out. Like you don't have to stay there. So.
Thank you so much. We are coming to the end of our conversation, which I loved. But before we close, do you have any advice that you want to give to the listeners on how to start their journey with money and removing the shame? And I know you shared it already a lot, but if you would give the biggest advice, I would say.
Yeah. Biggest advice. Oh, this is a great question. I feel the pressure. There's so much advice out there. I would say the biggest advice is if you are listening to this and you can relate to feeling shame around money in any aspect, whether it be about your debt, the fact that having below a certain number in your savings account scares the crap out of you. The fact that like maybe you don't have a retirement account and you're older and you're feeling like I'm so far behind. If you feel shame in any aspect around money, my biggest advice is to think of a person in your life that is safe and that you trust and tell them. My biggest advice is to start talking about the shame. And I think the reason why I went that route is because it's such an important piece of getting to a place where you then can acknowledge and surrender and be like, I'm ready to do this work. The more you talk about it, and the first time that when I got on the phone with AJ regarding her programming, I cried and I told her, I'm freaking out. I feel like such a loser. I don't know what to do. I have no savings. I'm in credit card debt. She just listened to me and she said, it's going to be okay. Like I have been there and I got you. And I think that's what I needed in order to even make the steps. I'm not gonna sit here and say, go download a budget. Like you could Google 1,000 budget templates, right? It's not about the budget. It's not about finding the perfect budget template. It's about releasing the shame out in whatever capacity. And I'm going to tell you this right now. There's not one person in this world who doesn't have some sort of shame around something around money. So,
Wow. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome.
What a conversation. It brought a lot of emotions.
Yeah. That's
money
what I love
is triggering
too.
for me.
Yes, because it feels like money has, or at least for me, like money is, I never thought about it in the emotional sense, so it feels like this is something that like learned, like I should have just learned how to do it and it's just knowledge that I can pull from. But once you start to tap into all the emotion behind it and realize that it is going to be kind of like that work to work through things, that was where I was like, whoa. And I feel like you can really make a big impact and lasting effects. And also it is like that going through the muck. Steph and I always talk about that, like when you're sitting in the muck and you know that you're in a growth moment, but it sucks sometimes when you're in the uncomfortable parts. But once you get through to the other side, or you make it through that muck, and there may be more, you're like, wow, that was amazing. I did it. So I feel like with the money stuff, like understanding there is a lot of emotion tied to it. And it's not just about like, okay, like let's find a budget template. Like you said, it's why do I feel this way? Or why are these habits happening? So I loved everything you shared, and I'm so glad. And thank you so much for the work that you do, because like I said, you never made me feel shameful. You always made me feel like the I got you thing. So your experience that you had with AJ, I feel like you just pass that on, and you are the helper, and you do make a difference. So again, thank you for everything.
Oh my
Thank
goodness.
you.
Thank you so much, Ashley. Thank you so much, Stephanie, for having me. That went so fast. I loved it. I love talking about money. I no longer went away for hours. So thank you. I really appreciate it.
Awesome.
Bye, girls.
All right, we'll
Bye.
see you next Sunday.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you for joining us on this journey of self-discovery and spiritual awakening. We hope the stories and insights we've shared today have inspired you to embrace your abundant soul and live your life with more presence, purpose, and passion.
Remember, the path to awakening is unique for each of us, but we're all connected by our yearning for deeper meaning and authenticity. So keep an open heart and mind, and trust that the universe will guide you exactly where you need to go.
This has been the Abundant Soul Podcast. See you next Sunday as we continue to explore the depths of spiritual awakening and personal growth.